Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, BERNINA Embroidery Software 8, Alternating Pattern Runs. You can submit questions by typing them into the questions pane in the control panel anytime during the presentation. Our presenter is Debbie Lashbrook. Hello, Debbie.
Hi, Julie, and welcome everyone. This webinar is going to focus on how to create and edit alternating pattern fills. This was a new feature of Software 8 when it was first introduced. We have almost 400 patterns in the software, plus the ability to create our own patterns, and we can import patterns from our machines as well. So this gives us a lot of creativity with regard to pattern fills. You can manipulate any pattern by changing the size, the spacing, and the way the rows and columns offset from each other. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the pattern fills. There is a step-by-step handout that's available now for you to download if you haven't done so already. In addition, this will be placed on the website following the webinar, so you'll be able to download it there. We'll learn during the webinar about how to use the layout function, which is in the layout toolbox in the software. We're also going to be creating with the array tool, and then we're going to focus on alternating pattern fills. We'll also learn how to copy object properties from one object to another. And I will be showing you how to add basting stitch markers to help you align a multi-hoop design. Now, we're not going to use the multi-hooping feature. We're going to actually manually split the files for this project. And thereby, we're going to be creating a continuous embroidery design. As far as supplies you would need to complete the project, you either need fabric for a table runner or a finished table runner to embroider. Tearaway stabilizer was used with the table runner, isocord thread, a fabric marker, and I use the mega hoop. That is the preferred hoop for this. The width is right for the design, and then with it being a longer hoop, it wouldn't take you as many rehoopings. So when you look at the object properties for alternating pattern fills, you'll see that there's a primary pattern and then there is a secondary pattern. So by manipulating and changing around the pattern that you select, as well as the size of the different patterns and the spacing, you can get all sorts of combinations. So we're going to go ahead and look at the lesson now, but before I start the project, I want to show you just a few things with pattern fills. I think it will help give you an idea of how they work. So I have created a pattern fill here, and I'm going to double click to open up object properties. And this was a pattern that was, it is actually in the BERNINA V5 pattern set. And I'm going to make a couple of quick clones, and those quick clones are made by right-clicking and dragging. And I just want to show you what some of these changes will change, how making the changes will affect the pattern. And so if you want to look at the size X and also the column spacing, you can see that they correspond to one another, and the size Y and the row spacing correspond to one another. And when that happens, the rows just meet and the patterns will just meet. So if I change the size of this second pattern to 12 millimeters and apply that, and when I zoom in, you can see how the width of the pattern increased, and now there's crossover in the pattern. I'm going to undo that, and this time I'm going to change the size of the Y. I'm going to change it to 8 millimeters and apply that. And now you can see how the length or the height of the pattern has increased. So the size X and the size Y will influence the length and the height of the pattern, or the width and the height of the pattern. Now let's change the row spacing, and I'm going to change this to 8 millimeters and apply that. So by increasing the row spacing, I have created space that we can now add a pattern to. So I'm going to add an alternate pattern to this. And this alternate pattern that I'm going to choose is in the heirloom category. And it's 738. If you are only looking at the drawings of the pattern, remember that you can click on Show True View and you can actually see the pattern in stitches. I'll click OK and then click Apply, and you can see the pattern is now set in between the original pattern. So I want you to notice that when I added that pattern, the row spacing automatically changed. I'm going to undo this so you can see what it was. It was at 8, and when I redo it, it is now at 5.37. So when you add a pattern, it automatically changes the row spacing. So I'll choose this next clone, and we're going to keep the pattern and the size and the row spacing and the column spacing the same, but I'm going to add that same pattern. And again, it's in the heirloom category. And when I apply that, notice that it is actually this very same pattern that is shown up above. So it isn't necessary to change the row spacing in order to make an alternate pattern. The software is going to automatically do that for you. The next thing I want to do is I'll make a quick clone of this, and we'll drag it over here. And now I'm going to change the row spacing of this combination pattern. And let's change it to 8 and apply that. And you can see by changing the row spacing of the combined pattern, I can make the rows move further apart. So there's a lot of experimenting, a lot of playing with the different controls. If I want to make both the patterns a little bit larger, I can also do that. And I want to make another quick clone of this pattern and do a few more changes before we start our project. So in this case, let's change the size of I want to change the size of the alternate pattern. And I'm going to change that to 15 and the size Y to 6. And I'll click on Apply. Now notice I've created a crossover pattern here. So only the alternate pattern was affected. The original pattern was not changed because I made the size changes to the alternate pattern and not the original. So you can do all sorts of different effects this way. Now, if I want to go in and if I want to spread these out so they don't cross over, I can come back and change my column spacing to a 15 and my row spacing to a 6. So I make these correspond to the size of the alternate pattern. And when I apply that, now I have spread everything out. So again, just experiment and play with this. There's lots of different things that you can do. Now, one thing that you might want to do when you're experimenting with the different settings is change the color of one of the patterns, and then you can kind of lay it over the original pattern and you can tell what changed from the original pattern. Now let's go ahead and start our project. And for this, I do have the mega hoop. I'm going to hide it for right now so we can go ahead and see a little bit in more detail what's going on when we create our table runner. Go to the layout toolbox and click on define work area. Now I want to be in US measurements for this. I'm going to change the measurement to US. And I'm going to measure my actual table runner. My table runner was 12 inches in width and 36 inches in height. I want to unlock proportions in order to get that correct. And I'm going to click OK. And the layout just is kind of in the background. So it gives me an idea about how many repeats I need. It's not going to stitch out. It's just to symbolize the table runner in the background. Now I want to activate my grid, and I want to make sure that I put a dot in front of Show Design Grid. I want Snap to Grid on. The size is fine, and I'm going to click OK. And I'll zoom in here to make our first diamond shape that we're going to use. Go to the Digitize toolbox and select the Closed Object tool. And when I rest my cursor on an intersection, notice how the grid lines change. And this helps you draw nice, even designs. So I'm going to go down 5 spaces and over 2, and then down 5 spaces over 2. And notice how my mouse is snapping to that grid. And these are all left clicks that I'm doing, and I press enter, and the shape is generated. Now I'll go ahead and deactivate the grid. I only wanted that in the background as I was making my diamond shape. I'll press escape and then select the diamond shape and go to the Mirror Merge toolbox, and we'll use the Array tool. With the array, I'm going to change the number of rows to 8 and the columns to 3. And you can just click on that drop-down arrow and choose. Now, I want to zoom in, and I want to make sure that I don't create crossover. So I want them just touching. And when I click, I can activate all my diamond shapes. Now you can see it's not centered on my layout. So I want to select everything. And notice when I select everything, it doesn't select the background layout. It only selects the objects that have been placed on top of that. So to get it into even position, I change the X to 0 and the Y to 0 and press enter. And now my diamond shapes are aligned and centered in my table runner. I'll deselect by clicking away from the design, and then I want to hold down the control key, and I'm going to select every other diamond shape as I go down the panel. Now remember, if you are in True View, it is hard to tell what's selected. So this might be a time that you'd want to switch to Design View, and it's very easy to tell what's selected because the diamond shapes turn pink. I'm going to come down to my stitch toolbar and right click on the ripple fill, because I'm not going to do all alternating pattern fills in the diamond shapes. Every other one is going to be a ripple fill. And I'm going to open this up a little bit. So I'm going to change the stitch spacing to 4.5 and press apply. And as I zoom in, I'll switch back to artistic view, and you can see that every other diamond shape is now a ripple fill. So these other shapes, we're going to add alternating patterns runs. And the handout makes suggestions. You do not have to follow the handout. You can have some fun experimenting if you wish. I'm going to select the pattern. And for this first one, I'll click on select. And when I click on the drop-down arrow, this shows me all the different pattern fills that are available. So we have quite a few built-in patterns, but remember, you can make your own custom patterns as well. For this first pattern, it's Bernina V5 group, and I'm going to choose the NP 00504. I click OK and I apply that. So your first step is to add the very first pattern. You'll always have to check your alternate pattern in order to have these options available to you. And when I click on select, I can go to this, I'm going to use this same group and I'm going to choose the NP 00511. Or sorry, not this one. It's actually, it is this one. I'm losing the place in my handout, so sorry about that. NP 00511. I'll click OK, and I'm going to apply that. Now notice in the preview how the patterns overlap some. So I want to increase the spacing, and I'm going to do that by increasing the row spacing. So I'll swipe across the row spacing and enter 0.3. Now when you're experimenting, what I would suggest that you do is use the up and down arrows, because that will move the patterns in small increments. The only reason I'm swiping across and knowing a value to input is that I experimented until I got something that worked. I'll apply that, and now you can see that the rows have spread apart more. For this next one, we'll go again to create the pattern. We'll click on select. This is also in the Bernina V5, and I'm going to choose pattern 15 for this and click OK. And then apply. I'll place a check mark by alternate pattern and click on select, and then choose the heirloom category and A705, click OK, and click apply. Now for this one, I like the pattern arrangement. I'm not going to change the spacing or the size at all. For this next one, again, choosing the pattern fill, go to select, and for this, it is a home deck pattern. And A404, I'll click OK and apply. I'll check alternate pattern, click on select. This is also a home deck pattern. It would help if I got the right category there. And this is A405. I'll click OK and apply that. Now notice how these are very, very condensed. So if I want to spread the patterns out, I can choose to change both the column as well as the row spacing. So again, you can experiment with these different amounts. And I also want to change the row spacing. I'm going to do that at 0.3 as well and apply that and see how that opened up the pattern. For this next one, again, we'll choose the pattern fill, click on select, and this is in NP004. And I will choose this pattern and click OK. And here I'm going to change the size of this pattern. And I'll apply that. Now, it is okay to use that same pattern, and you can change. We're going to go back and we're going to get that same pattern, and you can create some interesting effects by using the very same pattern. So that is in that same category. And so you can see that the same pattern can look totally different. Now, I'm not going to go through and change the rest of these because I think you get the idea, and you can follow the handout as well. So let's go on to the next step. And what I did with my pattern runs or fills is I selected it, right click, and select copy object properties. Then I came down a little bit further and chose a diamond shape that had just the basic step fill, and I can right click and apply those same properties. So you don't have to create all different patterns, although you certainly could. By selecting the diamond shape, right clicking and copying the properties, and then going to another area, right clicking and applying those properties, you can create the rest of your table runner. So once you get all those properties copied and pasted, and you would make each one of these solid diamond shapes have some kind of alternating pattern run. If I zoom in, you can see that the outline around these objects is spotty. Now, if you have show outlines on, sometimes this is hard to tell, but if I deactivate the show outlines, you're now going to see that there's not a complete outline around this diamond. So it is best if I add an outline to each of the shapes. So I'm going to select everything with Control A. I'll go to the Edit toolbox and select Outlines and Offsets. Here, I want Object Outlines checked and Offset Outlines unchecked. You can choose whatever type of stitch you want. I'm going to do a contrasting color, and I'll click OK. And when I zoom in, you can see an outline has been added around each of the diamond shapes. If you look over in color film, though, it's going to stitch a diamond shape and then do the outline around it, which would not be very well stitched out design. So I'm going to select everything, and I want to sequence by color. I have my two colors shown there. All I have to do is click OK, and now my colors are combined, and it would make for a more efficient stitch out. Now, when I activate my hoop, you can see that the mega hoop is placed in the center of the design, and I really want to scoot the design down so that I can manually split these objects into separate hoopings. So to do that, I'm going to have to right click on my show hoop icon and select manual spacing and click OK. Now I can select the entire design and I could use my down arrow key to move the design so that it is now within the hoop. If you still have your grid activated at this point, the design moves very, very slow. So make sure you deactivate grid before you try to move the design with the arrow key. Now I'm going to activate my grid again, just long enough to create some basting hoop markers. And for those of you who have maybe a smaller machine that doesn't use a large hoop, the basting hoop markers can help you align your designs when you do a multi-hoop design. They are found in the digitized toolbox way down at the bottom, and you'll see basting stitch marker. You have 4 different types to choose from. I'm going to choose the cross and I'll click OK. So my design fits I can actually stitch 3 rows of diamond shapes. And I want to place my markers so that they are within the hoop and on a grid line is the easiest. Notice that the grid line turns red when I have my basting stitch marker on it. I set it with 2 clicks, and then I'm going to move over to the opposite side and do the same with 2 clicks. If I hold down the Alt key, I can get over to move my design, and I want it to be at the end of the next 3 rows. Again, I wait until my grid line turns colors and I do 2 clicks and 2 clicks. And then I'll press escape. Now I can go ahead and get rid of the grid, and I'm going to hide the hoop for now. And I can select my 2 marks on the left, and I can always go into the arrange tool box and align the centers vertically. That's just an added precaution to make sure that they are even. And if I want to do that to the ones across, I can align centers horizontal. And you can see that they didn't move, so I did get them accurately placed. Now we're going to select those red markers and copy and paste, and I'm going to turn them to green. So I've got a set of red and a set of green. As I mentioned, I'm not going to use the multi-hooping feature of this software. I'm going to show you how to manually split a design. So I know that I can do 3 rows in 1 hooping. So I'm going to drag a bounding box around my 3 diamond rows in addition to the basting stitch markers. And I'm going to copy. I'm going to open up a new design, and I'm going to paste that in my hoop. And you can see that everything is going to fit within that hoop. So the first design will stitch, and I only need 1 set of markers here. So with this, I can choose the green markers and delete those, leaving just the red markers. So that first design is ready now to stitch, and at the very end, my basting stitch markers will stitch, and that will give me something to align with my next hooping. So I would do File, Save As, and I'm just going to put this on my desktop. I'm going to call this Split Design 1, and I'll save this. Now, one other thing that we need to do, if I activate Design View, do you see all those jump stitches? So what I want to do is come over here to my outlines and go to the Edit toolbox, click on Blackwork Run, and then click on the bottom diamond. And you can see I now only have a few jump stitches. If I had, and this is one thing that I love, this new feature that we have with the update where the tie-offs cut cut shows. If I had moved my diamonds just a little bit closer together before I activated them, I would not have those cuts there and trim. So remember to always look at your design view. Now, what I would have to do to get rid of those now is select and then move the diamonds closer. But you would, if you set your diamonds so that they just touch, you won't have those cuts. Now I'll go back to my basic design, and this time I'm going to grab the next diamonds, and I want both sets of my basting stitch markers. I'm going to copy, open a new design, and paste. So here I have the next 3 stitching. Here I would activate show objects. That way I know where my beginning markers are. So I need those left in. I'm going to delete these next 2. And then for the green ones, I've already got up at the top, I've got my 2 green markers, and I have my red markers. So these are duplicate markers. I don't need those. That gives me the red ones up at the top, and then I have my green ones down at the bottom. Now, I'll collapse these back, and I need this first set moved to the start of the design because I want those to stitch first so I can use those for aligning with the split design 1. And then I want the rest of the design to stitch. And at the end, I'll have another set of markers that I will align with my 3rd hoop. So here again, I would want to activate my Blackwork Run to eliminate jump stitches. And this would be saved as split design 2. Then I'll go back to my original design and select the last 2 rows, copy, and then open a new design and paste. And here I need the first 2. So I do not need the ones at the bottom. I just need these first 2 to align. And these will need to be moved to the start so I can use those to align and then stitch the rest of the design. I can select this and also add Blackwork Run. And then this file would be saved as split design 3. So we have our total design, which you would want to save and keep. That way you could go back and easily change some of the alternating pattern fills if you wish. And then we have split design 1, which has the first 3 rows and the basting stitch markers. Then we have split design 2, which will have markers to align at both sides. And then we have our last design, which has just the markers in the beginning. So let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. and I've got slides to show you how to stitch this out. And you can say in this sample, I had the diamond shapes closer together, and that way I did not have any jump stitches at all. So in terms of making this project, you would want to mark your table runner. You'll find the vertical center as well as the horizontal center, and then measure out from the center the height of the design as it appears in your software. So if the design total was, say, 20 inches, it'd be 10 inches on one side and 10 inches on the other. Back your table runner with tearaway stabilizer, and I had a black table runner, so I used black tearaway stabilizer, and just line it up one piece over the entire length of the table runner. And you can use spray based, or you can actually baste if the stabilizer to the table runner. Then you'll use your template, and you're going to align the template with the marked vertical center. So the template is placed here right over the center that's marked on the table runner. And you want to place that in the mega hoop so that the first design will fit within the template. And when you bring your design in, you want to make sure that the vertical center will land right on the marked center of your tablecloth or your table runner. And if it doesn't, just use the move motif and make sure that it will align with that vertical mark on your table runner. And you can use absolute check to align the tip of the design. If you touch the tip of the design on your screen with the marked line at the end of your table runner, and make sure that that aligns, again, adjusting the with the move motif if you need to, and you'll only move this one up or down, not right or left, because your center alignment has already been established. And then you'll go over and check the other diamond tip. So you'll touch it on your screen, and the needle will remove, or will be moved to that location, and you can make sure it aligns. Now, for those of you who have a machine with pinpoint placement, you can use that feature. This process, or this whole project, was designed way before pinpoint placement. I made this project years ago, so the markers and absolute check was all I had to align. Once you're aligned both vertical as well as horizontal, you're ready to stitch that first file. And it will stitch, as you see, the markers here. And sometimes the markers are handy. I use the markers, although we wouldn't have had to, because we've got a definite tip here at the point of the diamond. That would have been sufficient. But I wanted to use the markers so I could teach you how to use markers, because a lot of times we don't have a definite point like we do on this design. So they're kind of an added detail that wouldn't have been necessary with this design. So you remove, remove the tablecloth, and you've completed the first file. Bring in the second file, and now you're ready to align the next section. Again, just make sure that the tips are included in the hoop, because you're going to need to align. You'll mark, you've got that center line that you'll align with the template. You'll tighten your hoop screws, make sure everything is aligned, and then go back to the machine, check the vertical alignment first, and then you can check the alignment of the basting stitch markers if you're working on a project where the basting stitch markers are important. In this case, all you would have needed to do was touch the tip of that of the diamond shape. and you'll check both the left as well as the right. Here I'm showing you how you can align at the tip rather than using the basting stitch markers. And then you'll stitch that second file. And there's the second file completed, again with the basting stitch markers here. And then you repeat that for the third area of the hoop. Align the vertical center first, align the diamond tips, and make sure that everything will align correctly and stitch that last section. And here again, you can align with the tip versus using the basting stitch markers. The other points checked, and then you're ready to stitch. So again, that first, the project was developed before pinpoint placement was thought about on our machines. I do want to let you know that the third quarter webinar, and this is the regular scheduled webinar, I am doing some additional webinars while we're all sheltering in place. But the third quarter webinar in September will be on multi-hooping with pinpoint placement. So I'll go over a newer feature of a machine, or of our machines, to show you how you can multi-hoop successfully with that. Now, again, object properties is where you go and play. All I can do is encourage you to try some different combinations. Remember, if you use the arrow keys, that's going to be how you can nudge until you find something that works. Those numbers don't just magically appear. There's a lot of playing with this. But just to show you how you can manipulate one design in many different ways, you can take a pattern and you can change it to be all sorts of different looks. So this is combining these two patterns and manipulating row spacing as well as size of the design. So I would encourage you to have fun with this. As a tip for you, you always want to add the smaller pattern first. So for example, these two patterns made these two designs. And the smaller pattern was added here first, and then the larger pattern was brought in. What you need to know with the alternating patterns is that the second pattern always adapts to the first one. So if you add the smaller pattern first, you're going to have more success. Some other things that you might want to try is a multicolor pattern fill. And this one you cannot achieve with the alternating pattern runs. What you would have to do is duplicate the object and change the row spacing of each object. And then you can change the underneath object to be one color, the object on top to be another. So this is duplicating a pattern. It is not alternating pattern fills, but it's the same basic process, except you have to have two different layers. Also, pattern fills and alternate pattern fills work with the globe effect. Remember, the globe effect is in your effects toolbar, which is part of the stitch toolbar. Once you create your duplicate or your alternating pattern fill, you can just click on the globe effect and that will give it some dimension. One other thing that you can do is the wave effect. This is also found in the effects toolbar. And again, create your double pattern and then apply the wave effect. And remember that you can try different sizes of the same pattern in your alternating pattern fills, so you can get some different types of effects that way. And I just want to mention, some of you I know have been noticing this already, but there are several YouTube videos that have been uploaded recently for Software 8. This is going to continue for the next few weeks. There are going to be 26 sets in all for a total of 245 videos. These are very short videos that will teach you about different things of the software. So take advantage of this time being at home and take some time to learn our wonderful Software 8. So I'm ready for questions, Julie.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Debbie. We do have a few people who want to know if this will be available in a PDF.
For the
Or I'm
webinar
sorry.
slides,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
yes, I can make it available as a PDF, and I'll send it to Julie to be posted along with the regular handout.
Okay. Next question. You're using geometric shapes. Can you apply this method to odd shapes? For example, can you digitize an outline like of an animal, like an elephant? And is it possible to create pattern fills inside the shapes?
Sure. All you would have to do is digitize, like you mentioned, an elephant shape, and you digitize it with the closed object tool. By default, it will add a step fill. You go into object properties, you change it to a pattern fill, and then add the alternate pattern fill. So yes, that is possible.
Okay. Can you alternate columns instead of rows? And can you alternate colors?
And the colors that, as I said in the slide, it has to be done by layering the two objects. You cannot use alternating pattern fills to do a two color. But what you can do is select the object, duplicate it, offset it, and then change the colors of one of the layers.
Okay. And then the columns?
No, they only do rows.
Okay.
But what you can do is, let me, in object properties, when you've got, let me come up here and we'll go back to this split design so I can choose one of these. So here, there's an offset. That would give it the look, like if I change this offset, you see how it's offsetting the patterns? That gives it more of a look, but that would be one effect you could do. You can also change the angle. So if I come down here and make it, instead of 0, make it 90 and apply that, that's probably not the best pattern to choose for that. Let's choose this one and alter it 90. So that gives it the illusion of going the other way. So you would do that by changing the angle value.
Okay, great. On page 7, what was the Alt key used for?
Oh, when I had what it does is and I can show you this if I've got a digitizing tool, and okay, and I'm clicking, and see how my screen is moving, and I'm trying to get up here to get a hold of an icon up here. If I hold down the Alt key, that deactivates the scrolling feature. So what I used the Alt key for was when I had the basting stitch marker selected, and I was moving my mouse and I was trying to get to the place I wanted. If I hold the Alt key down, it deactivates auto scroll, and then I can set whatever kind of click I want, or I can reach up here and see how the screen just keeps moving. But if I hold down the Alt key, I can come up here and click on an icon. So the Alt key temporarily deactivates the screen from moving with auto scroll.
Okay, good to know. Do you have a PDF on how to manually split designs?
Well, I mean, this handout tells you how to manually split. So all you do when you manually split is you just, and I'm not sure if she's talking about the multi-hooping feature or if she's talking about what I did tonight, that I manually split the design tonight. I decided what I wanted included in each hoop, and that's what manually splitting is in essence. You're deciding what you want included in the multi-hoops in your all of the different hoops that you have. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's as close as, and unless she's talking about in the multi-hooping feature where you use add splitting line. I mean, that's another form of manual splitting.
Okay.
So she can
Okay.
email me and give me a little bit more information about what it exactly is she needs.
All right. Okay, great. Let's see. Can you show the runner again? All right.
And I do have it folded in. It was awfully long and I couldn't get the entire table runner. So the design didn't go all the way to the edge. There was about 6 inches on each side.
Okay. All right. Let me see if some more questions came in towards the end here. I have a lot of thank yous. We have someone watching from Australia.
Welcome.
Thank you for bringing a little color into our stay-at-home days. Much appreciated. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Debbie, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. Tomorrow, you will receive a follow-up email from GoToWebinar with a recording of this webinar. Also, in a couple days, the webinar and the handouts will be available on Bernina.com. You'll click on the Learn and Create tab, then Classes, and then Webinars. If you have other questions, please email me or Debbie. On behalf of Bernina, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.